Who Gets to Decide? A liberty-based podcast that brings a little piece of sanity to a confused society drowning in a culture of craziness. And here is your host, Seth Martin.
Well, all right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Who Gets to Decide. This is episode 625. I'm Seth Martin, your host. Thank you for joining me this evening. Glad you're here and always happy you're listening. Well, this is this episode, I didn't really know what to talk about today because there's been really nothing happening. I don't like just delving into pure politics. So that wasn't going to be any fun. And I ran across this video of Andrew Bridgen, and it's several weeks old, I think. But for those of you that don't know who Andrew Bridgen is, he was a former member of Parliament and, kind of an insider in the UK government, I would say. And he was been just fearless against COVID, the COVID lockdowns, the vaccines. He's been very outspoken on some of these, what I would consider to be third rail issues. And I ran across this video of him being interviewed regarding Epstein and the intelligence agencies and that kind of discussion. Just as a refresher, my reason for this is Andrew Bridgen right here, if you've never seen it before. My reason for being so adamant, I guess, about this Epstein stuff is just that, it kind of goes back to the question of what kind of government do we have? The government that we all learned about in 8th grade history is that this government is of, for, and by the people. We overthrew the British government because of a tax on paper and on tea. Okay? Now we're taxed about 1,000 times more than that. Our property rights are constantly under attack. There's I don't know if you know this or not, but there's this big movement going on really all across the nation. It's like a tax revolt on property taxes. And what people have noticed is that, wow, I can own my house. I mean, I could pay off the mortgage and own my house outright, but it still costs me like $10,000 a year to live in my own house. And, people, this is starting to kind of resonate with people. Like, back when houses were $15,000 or $20,000, the amount of tax you paid was insignificant. But now that houses are worth like $500,000, all of a sudden 3%, is $15,000 a year, more than $1,000 a month. And this is starting to occur to people that there's something wrong here. I mean, it really is just kind of obvious, but there's not a lot of discussion among our politicians about these things. The affordability of just having a family, I mean, we have people that can barely take care of themselves, much less, embark on having a family of 4 or a family of 5 or something like that, or even 6 or more, and trying to take care of them, provide health care, provide food and shelter and school and, just all the things that goes into having a family. And all this to me is tied up in this Epstein stuff. Now, you may not see it. You may say, well, I don't know, Seth. I don't see the Epstein thing. Well, look, the idea is that part of the idea anyway is that if the government is going in the wrong direction, we have these right track, wrong track polls. Is the government on the right track? Is the government on the wrong track? And, if you got a system that's really controlled by a handful of elites, and when I say a handful, I mean less than 1,000, and they just have a bunch of blackmail on people, and they can pull the strings in the intelligence agencies to either blackmail people or pay people off to control the population, to control the government, to get the government to deploy its force in the direction that it sees fit, then, that's not what our founding was about. That's not the America that I learned about in grade school, which was a long time ago, and maybe that's changed. I'll consider that. But it certainly didn't change because the people voted for it or the people clamored for some sort of change. We want more control of our lives. Now, there have been times, like after 9/11, where people clamored for security. And we got the Patriot Act, and we got a whole bunch of other things. We got, when the financial crisis happened, we got the Dodd-Frank Act, which now means the money you put into your bank is not your money. Just by the act of depositing the money, you transfer custody of your money to the bank. Now, I bet you nobody listening to this knows about that, but that's true. So if the bank, one day you wake up in the morning and the bank is insolvent, the government doesn't bail them out. They just confiscate your deposits, and those become part of the bank, and they give you shares in the bank. So that all these things are now part of our system, and that's just a couple. That's just a couple off the top of my head. There's many, 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 many more. But all these things were changed without people voting on it. I mean, these guys run around and go, democracy, democracy, but democracy's sacred. Your vote is sacred and all this stuff. And how can it be? How can that possibly be when the people aren't directing or not in charge in the direction of the government? So to me, this Epstein thing is very, very critical in terms of a consent of the governed. Like if you're going to have all this force, well, then you need to have my consent. And if you're going to have my consent, then it can't be, this system of blackmail and payoffs and, where a very, very few numbers of people run the government. It's got to at least be the representatives get to vote their conscience in the House of Representatives or in the Senate at a minimum. This has got to be what it is. And the thing about this Epstein deal is it calls all that into question. And that in my mind, that's why this is important. And this is why I keep harping on it. And I know Congress passed unanimous consent to release the Epstein Files, but, I don't know. Are we going to get them? Maybe not. We don't know. We won't know for another 30 days, maybe around Christmas time. Maybe it'll be a Merry Christmas. And, but I just want you, the reason I want to play Andrew Bridgen, because I want you to consider the ramifications of releasing this information. Okay? Now, even with the ramifications, I'm all for it. Because to me, the truth, it's just like the saying, the truth will set you free. I don't see how the truth can hurt us. Now, we can be embarrassed about it. We can be ashamed of it. We can be ashamed of ourselves that we allowed it to happen, or there's a whole number of negative things that can come with the truth. But I don't think anything evil can come from the truth, and I think everybody can survive the truth. And that's why I think it's important to have the truth. So let's jump into this clip with Andrew Bridgen. And I don't know his interviewer here, but Andrew Bridgen to me is like a Thomas Massey or a Rand Paul, except he's even more mean what you say and say what you mean. So I think he's very much worth listening to. And I just want you to just consider for a moment the seriousness of the fallout of this Epstein situation.
As far as Secret Service agencies go, I don't think you wouldn't be able to get a fag paper between Mossad, the CIA, and MI6. I think they're all working together. I think they just allocate the jobs on who's got the most assets in that area to do what the common purpose is. I was told by an American source close to the Trump camp that if the whole of the Epstein files were released, there wouldn't be 100 serious politicians left standing in America. I think it's all going to be redacted. I was also told that there was over 300 UK passport holders that travelled to Epstein's Island.
Okay, so now I don't know what that means, 100 serious politicians. Is he talking about national politicians? Is he talking about politicians nationwide, like in municipalities and states? I'm not sure. But even if he's just talking about national, that means that there's let's see, there's 435 in the House, there's another 100 in the Senate, so 535. He's talking about 400 plus politicians maybe having to resign in disgrace. I mean, that's incredible. What's incredible to me about that is, how did you get them to vote for it? They all voted for this, to release these files. So this is just hearsay. Andrew Bridgen saying that someone close to the Trump campaign told him this. We don't know if it's true. But, if someone close to the Trump administration thinks that the Epstein files are this serious, then you just got to know that Trump knows that they're that serious. And if he knows they were that serious, why would he ever tried to have swept this under the rug and pretend like there's nothing to see? It's bewildering to me, unless somebody said that this would just destroy America. And of course, he doesn't want to destroy America. And I don't want to destroy America. Okay, but again, maybe America needs to be destroyed. I don't know. If something is so evil that it'll destroy America, but it's true, like I said, the truth will set you free. I mean, maybe it destroys the power centers of America. I don't see how it's going to destroy you or me. Okay. Truth, some evil truth about our representatives and our government. It may destroy the government, and maybe we have to form a new government. But again, that just is what it is. I mean, I'm not saying that'll happen. I'm just saying that what's the worst that could happen? All these people are discredited, and they have to spend the rest of their lives, either in jail or walking around with a paper bag over their head. I don't see how that's harmful to me or you. I say bring it on. We need to know the truth, okay? We need to know whether or not going to the polls and voting for politicians is a waste of our time or not. I already think it is. I already kind of believe that it is. In fact, I'm probably going to sit out the midterms. I'm not happy at all with the way Trump is managing things. I'm happy with the way he's handling the immigration stuff and the border. But that's about it. I think his attempt to sweep this Epstein thing under the rug is just tragic. He's about to start another war in Venezuela. I think that's awful. He hasn't been able to negotiate a peace in Ukraine. He seems to be on board with just the total destruction of Gaza. And I don't know turning it into the Middle East, the Riviera of the Middle East. I mean, I totally am not on board with that. So I don't care if he loses the majority in the House and the Senate. I can tell you this, if he doesn't get on track pretty quickly, he's absolutely going to lose those majorities. And probably what's coming up next is impeachment. And this time they won't just stop, I don't think, at impeachment. I think they'll remove him from office. And I think they probably have grounds to do so. That's kind of the political side of it. But getting back to what Andrew Bridgen is talking about, I just don't see how we can be hurt by the truth. All right, let's continue.
300. And obviously there were other properties that Epstein had which were fitted with film cameras for the compromat. And that was the largest house in New York. And also he had a ranch, didn't he? I think it's going to run to a whole generation of politicians have been compromised. And it's almost as if it was a rite of passage. Until they'd got the compromat on you, you couldn't be allowed to get to high office.
Yeah, so what happened, when I was in grade school, it was, you could be anything you want to be in America. You can even be the president of the United States, And what he's just saying is that's not actually true. You had to be compromised first, and then they allowed you to be president of the United States. Now, in Trump's case, I don't think that was the case. I think Trump bucked the system. But I think we can all agree that Trump is a very unique individual, and not everybody is capable of blustering their way through the corporate media and the corporate and the establishment political class and things like that to become president of the United States. I mean, that's probably something uniquely Trump. But I can remember when they raided Epstein's property down there in the Virgin Islands, and they showed pictures of DVDs just full. I mean, just a safe full of these DVDs. Well, what's on those DVDs? Is it Bill Clinton? Is it Alan Dershowitz? With his underwear on, getting a massage? Is it Prince Andrew? Some young 14-year-old doing something to Prince Andrew? Or him doing something to some young 14-year-old? What's on there? And who's involved? And why do they hold so much power? People that, if you think about it, if I'm, committing crimes like that, or I'm with, a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, and I knowingly do that, well, that says something about not only the character of that person, but it also says, hey, the laws are for you, not for me. I make the laws, but I don't have to abide by them because I'm up here and you're down here. Is that America? If that's what's going on, is that America? And if that's going on, shouldn't the truth of that come out? Wouldn't it be better for you and me, citizens of America, if that truth comes out and those people are exposed and that system is shut down and run out of town? I mean, it seems like it would be better for you and me. All right, let's continue.
Because otherwise they couldn't control you. It's a complete control system, which is why we're seeing governments in lockstep on very strange issues around the world.
Is that why? Or are they?
What did Schwab say? He said we have penetrated the cabinets of the world.
So
I didn't want to be penetrated by Klaus Schwab. I can assure you that's why I didn't go to Davos when they invited me.
So are they still running operation like these, like with Epstein in this country, or even overseas and taking people out overseas in order?
All right, let's talk a little bit about that, because Whitney Webb has spoken about that. Now that Epstein's gone, the blackmail should go away, right? Or the control system should go away. And what Whitney Webb says about that is that even when Epstein was around and nobody really sweat the fact that he was getting arrested or anything and that they were going to lose control, mainly because a lot of this control mechanism has moved to electronic surveillance. I don't know if y'all have seen this, but the whole Apple phone, like when you're on your phone, your iPhone, it takes like an infrared picture of you. Like there's an infrared light that shines and your camera snaps pictures of you like every 5 seconds. People show this online. So when you're sitting there scrolling, so if you're looking at Pornhub or something like that, the camera is taking pictures of you while you're looking at that. Now, if you're anybody significant, that can be used against you to control you. So it's not enough actually just to control, the little people, and make sure that they can control the elections and control the narrative so that we all believe, all the things that they say. It's not enough to just control that. They want to control the lawmaking part of the government and the executive branch and all the administrators and all the managerial class that works in the government. Why do they want to control all that? because government is force. Okay? Yes, George Soros can have something called the Tides Foundation, and he can fund no king's rights and things like that. But George Soros can't pick up a bunch of guns and start aiming at people. But the government can. So if this group of people has control of the government, they have control of force. They can wield that force against you and me, and against whoever, foreign nations, whoever. That's why it's not enough just to control the people. They want to control the politicians also. All right, let's continue.
To keep this level of control over politicians and other businessmen, influential people?
I think they've got the people they've got. I mean, there will be successor organisations, but they've got the people they've got. I mean, if we could, if it was all exposed, it would just take down a whole generation of politicians around the world. And you know, when the Americans said to me we wouldn't have 100 serious politicians left in America if it all came out, I said, well, you don't want the ones that are compromised, do you? But I mean, if you think that if Trump's organisation they know what's out there, who's to say they're not currently blackmailing those politicians, whichever party they're in, on the release of the data? But I think it'll all be heavily redacted. Whether Trump's involved or not, I mean, he certainly was known to Jeffrey Epstein. He knew some of the stuff that was going on. We'll have to see. But I mean, it's amazing how information can be manipulated one way or another to implicate. I mean, our mainstream media, I think it was Malcolm X that said, the people with the most power in the world are the mainstream media because they have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And they do, don't they?
Yeah. Controlling the narrative is a very powerful superpower. It just is. I mean, if you can get on TV, I mean, I talk to my father-in-law and other family members all the time, and friends even, and they literally believe everything on Fox News. I mean, like, if I question something, they'll say, well, why do you question that? I'm like, it's public information now. But it hasn't been on Fox News, so they don't believe it. It hasn't been on CNN, so they don't believe it. It hasn't been on MSN Now, so they don't believe it. And the reason this is so powerful, especially for like a lot of retired people, people 70 and above, they're sitting at home all day long and watching Fox News or MS Now or CNN. That's what they do all day long. They just have it going on in the background. And all that propaganda, all that narrative is just coming out 24/7. And so when you pose some question about, I mean, there's so many things, right? I've seen, even in the pandemic where a lot of people don't believe anything that happened, right? I mean, hardly at all. You still got people that think, oh, it wasn't on purpose. There really was a virus, Yeah, it probably did leak from the lab. And they don't question, well, why was it there in the first place? Why were they working on something like that in the first place? They just think it was some innocent thing that got out. And then Trump, in all his brilliance and managerial expertise, launched Operation Warp Speed to, save all of us. I mean, there's people, that's what they believe. They don't know anything about the excess deaths, the massive rise in disability. For people that work in corporations, the number of people that are claiming long-term disability, hey, I can't work anymore, is way up. It's a double-digit % increase year over year. I mean, this is a real thing that's happening. And most of these people that you interact with, especially the older ones within your family, the whole thing's just a mystery. They've never heard of any of it. And so you can see how powerful it is to be able to control that narrative. And we see that in our own families. We see it with some of our friends, and it takes a real effort to break out of that situation. It's not even that easy, right? You can get on X, and there's fake things on X too. You're going to get on X, and you're going to look at something, and you're going to go, "Oh my God, this is outrageous," and you're going to look into it and find out that it's not real. Okay, it's made up. It's AI, or it's some false story. So there's false stuff out there, but I think the point is around free speech, and this is going to be a big battle at some point. There are people that think, well, we have to monitor all this activity on social media because we can't let, all this false information spread around the globe. But we've talked about this before on the show, that the only way to really decide what's true and what's not true is by talking about it. Somebody makes a case for why something's true, and then somebody else makes a case for why something's not true. And this goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until there's some sort of agreement. And maybe it's in the middle or something, or maybe one side is just completely vanquished. But the point is, the back and forth and the back and forth allows the truth to emerge. But if you just got somebody like Donald Trump saying, "Oh, that's fake news, we need to control that," and if it's unpopular, it runs counter to the narrative, and we just, censor it right off the internet, then there's no way to really ever know what's true. You just have, people are just discussing whatever the official narrative is. There's no counter narrative. It just doesn't exist. And that's obviously, that's going to leave people groping around. The same thing happened in the Soviet Union. Okay. The Soviet Union, after it got so bad, basically everybody in the Soviet Union knew that the official narrative was just false. You just couldn't say anything about it. But they all knew at that point. Once you're in decline like this, year after year after year after year, decade after decade after decade, everybody knows the truth at that point. Everybody has come to the realization that what these people in the Politburo are saying is just not true. And so the problem is they can't do anything about it. They just have to wait till it collapses. Maybe that's what we have to do too, because there's too many forces allied against us. The dollar's the world reserve currency, and the Federal Reserve is, just prints just unlimited amounts of money and creates unlimited amounts of credit. And maybe there's just nothing to do except wait till it collapses. I don't know. But the problem is that's not going to be good for anybody. So it would be better if we didn't do that. I think it's better to try to convince people and persuade people that dishonest money is the source of the problem, and corruption kind of stems from dishonest money. Without dishonest money, corruption becomes a lot more difficult, not impossible, but it becomes a lot more difficult and not as pervasive. All right, I'm going to switch gears here for a second. I just want to go to John McAfee. I found an old video of John McAfee. John McAfee, for those of you that know, he was a big libertarian, kind of crazy guy, but he also was the founder of McAfee, the virus protection software. And he was a very wealthy guy, but he kind of got into the crosshairs of the government a while back, and eventually he committed suicide. I'm using air fingers quotes. And so, the big joke, and it's not something to joke about, but the big joke in these circles is John McAfee didn't commit suicide, right? That's just not what happened. So let me pull up the John McAfee video and listen to what he's talking about. The guy, like him, think he's crazy or whatever, he has knowledge about certain things, and it's pretty crazy when you
attention, because really that's all that matters to me.
Did you think Trump was going to be president?
Yes, I hoped he was, actually, because the alternative was not very palatable to me.
Did you think
I will not tell you why, because it will implicate me in horrific...
Sounds like you're asking me to inquire, but I'm not going to.
I am actually, because I'm not sure I'm going to say it or not.
Well, it sounds like you're egging me on to ask you. I want to respect your privacy.
I am actually, because I'm not sure I will say it. I've never said it, ever.
Well, if you
not
want
in,
me
not
to...
in 6 years since I left police have I ever stated why.
Do you want to?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then, you're welcome.
Okay, so when I went on the run in Belize, I had friends in the U.S. Embassy in Belize. I knew what was coming down. I'm not stupid. I had arranged with the head of security. I was going to come in. He said, "Sir, we have it from the highest authority. We are not to allow you entry into the U.S. Embassy." Understand me. Who was the highest authority of the State Department? Hillary Clinton. I'm an American citizen with a American passport. I'm sorry. I'm not wanted in America. I've got no crimes in America. Is it not a reason to say, I don't think I'm going to vote for you?
And yet you're here.
Yeah, so John McAfee, I'm not even really clear on what he did wrong, but somehow he got in the crosshairs of the government. And look, this happens. I mean, look at all these January 6 people. They got in the crosshairs of the government. They did something that embarrassed the government, that made the government look foolish, that made the government look like it had done something wrong, okay? And when you do that, you all of a sudden become a target of the government. And I think this is kind of what happened to John McAfee. He basically found himself in the crosshairs of the government. And he's kind of on the run down in Belize, and he's trying to turn himself in, and they won't let him into the embassy. He's got a U.S. passport. He's an American citizen. They won't let him in the U.S. embassy to turn himself in. It's just a bizarre kind of thing that was going on with John McAfee. But listen to this next part, what he ended up doing, because he was trying to figure out what they were after him for. So listen to what he did. This is pretty ballsy move here on his part.
Here now.
For a month and a half, I was on the run. The reason that the government wanted to collect me was that after they had raided my property in 2012 in the jungle, shot my dog, abused me, destroyed $500,000 worth of my property over a bogus charge, I was pissed off. And so I donated to many secretaries within the government laptop computers, really nice ones that were preloaded with viral spyware. Within a week, the entire government computer system was under my control. I was watching, monitoring, listening. I was looking for information that they had set me up for that raid. I didn't find that. I did find out that the Minister of National Defense was the largest drug trafficker in all of Central America. And the Minister of Immigration, the largest human trafficker.
We don't want to get killed by them either, so we're probably not going to...
That's fine.
Okay, so he donated some computers with spyware on it to the government, and he was looking for information about his setup and couldn't find it, but he found all this other stuff. Look, I mean, that's pretty gutsy, but it just goes to show you, could John McAfee be lying? I guess, but what he's talking about is the same thing that Andrew Bridgen is talking about. He's talking about drug dealing, trafficking. He's talking about, I don't know, man. When I look at the Bill of Rights and when I read the Constitution, I don't see anything in the, Article 1 of the Constitution that gives Congress, the right to traffic human beings or to traffic drugs, or gives the federal government executive authority to do any of these things. And so the question is, why are government people involved in some of this criminal activity, and how do we stop it? How do we clean all that out and just start over, if you will? And I don't know the answer to that, but the first, I mean, I don't know how you do it, but the first thing you got to do is you got to show that it's actually happening, because there's too many normies out there, people that get to vote, that are just not paying attention. I mean, they're just not. If you try to talk to somebody in your family who's older than 70, about Epstein, you'll just find out very quickly they're not paying attention. They don't know anything about it. Maybe they know about it now because, Congress just passed this overwhelming thing and the news is talking about it more. But a year ago, they heard Trump saying it, but they had no idea why he's saying it. And and not only that, but they just think it's about the victims. Like they think it's about all these women that were abused. And it is about that. I'm not trying to discount that. But there is a greater thing happening here too, potentially. Yeah, I mean, anytime you have underage girls, being abused, there's going to be victims, and that's tragic for sure. But what's I don't want to say more tragic, but what's potentially a greater threat to all of us collectively is the fact that you have large numbers of politicians who are supposed to be controlled by you and I, right? By the polls. We go vote and they talk about issues and they debate issues, and we, the American people, answer polls and they look at those polls and so, but none of that's happening. You saw this with like Trump, like pre-October 7th. Okay, this is the date where Hamas broke out of Gaza and attacked a bunch of Jewish people in Israel and killed a bunch of people, like 1,300 people or something. So pre-October 7th, support for Israel, and Trump specifically on Israel, was like at plus 48%. It went all the way down to like, 2%. I mean, he lost 50% of his support on that specific issue. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. And yet they continued, even though his support was falling dramatically, the policies continued. And so the question is, how is that possible? How can you completely lose your base on some issue, but then continue to do it? Well, the answer is the politicians that could stop it are controlled. It's like controlled opposition. And the people that pay them to get reelected or whatever are just not in favor of stopping it. So it just continues. Even when the polls say it should be stopping. So the greater question is this a country of, for, and by the people? Or is it of, for, and by these elites who control the politicians through blackmail and campaign contributions and money and bribery and things like that? That's the real question. And Andrew Bridgen's probably right. It's probably going to be very redacted. Probably not going to know any of these names. It's either that or it's going to be, we're going to get there's an ongoing investigation and we can't release this information or that information. There's going to be some sort of stonewalling involved. There's no doubt about it. The government's just not going to, the CIA and the FBI and all these intelligence agencies, they're not just going to give this information up. That's the end of their game. And they're not going to give that up, I don't think. And I think he's right. It's either going to be redacted or there's going to be an ongoing investigation and they can't comment on this or that. And eventually people will get tired of asking about it and it'll probably go away. And 50 years from now, somebody will do a PhD thesis on it and the people from that generation will be totally shocked that America was this way. And they'll completely forget about people like me or Tucker Carlson talking about it or whatever. Maybe they won't forget Tucker Carlson talking about it, but certainly they're not going to remember that I talked about it. Anyway, that's I think that's it for this week's show or today's show. Thank you guys for coming in and watching and listening. For those of you listening on podcasts, for those of you listening on podcasts, come in and like the show on YouTube, share it, maybe even subscribe to the channel. It kind of helps the algorithm turn and crawl around and look for more people that might be interested in this type of topic. So I would appreciate it if you could do that. Let's see what else. Come in and comment on the show. Comment on what I'm saying. I like to read those comments when they come in, and I appreciate the interaction. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the show. Thank you guys for coming in. It was great having you. Look forward to having you next time on Who Gets to Decide. And until then, peace. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.